Nurah Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nurah Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nurah Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nurah Speaks Podcast, and I am your host, Nurah Muhammad. It is always a pleasure and a privilege to have you with me each and every week as we talk about issues that are important to our community, as we discuss ways to navigate so that we can produce better outcomes within our community and for our families and for our children. And I am back with you this week with episode 128. Welcome to the podcast. I'm very excited for today's conversation. As I say in the opening, one of the issues that I like to discuss on the podcast is civic engagement and how we can be involved in the operations that impact us locally, the state level, and certainly on the national level. I believe that we have to be active and we have to be proactive and take those measured steps that are necessary so that we can, produce results that are favorable. So much in terms of statistics in the Black community are negative. When we talk about the number of children that are not born in families, when we talk about the high rates of diabetes and heart disease, deaths from COVID-19, which is a current issue, so many of those numbers that reflect Black people reflect us in a very negative and poor condition. So it is one of my goals with this show to improve our condition, to improve our outcomes, so that we don't have to always find ourselves or frequently find ourselves in a needy state or in a suffering state. And so in episode 128, I want to talk about the census. This year is the year that the census is being taken. And so I want to explain what that is, why, how we can submit our answers to the census questionnaire, how this impacts us, why it's important for us to engage in the questionnaire. And I think that to a great degree, we may be uninformed, misinformed with the census, and also to a great extent suspicious of any federal questionnaire, because the census questionnaire is a federal questionnaire. We are suspicious of authority in this country. We are suspicious of healthcare in this country, and rightfully so. We have been treated so unjustly on so many levels by so many different state actors and agencies that when we see another one coming, we're very hesitant and slow to be involved. And we don't always see ourselves as citizens, the citizens of this nation with equal rights and equal opportunity. And so I get that. I understand that. And I also understand the purpose of the census and how participating in the census can impact us, especially down to our local level. So I want to talk about that. But before I get into it, sometimes we think, we don't want the government in our business. If you file your taxes, the government is already in your business. If you have a job, the employer is already reporting, to the IRS that they're paying you and what they're paying you. That's why, when we're filing for unemployment, unemployment benefits, we're able to get them because we have unemployment benefits that are taken out of our paychecks each week or bi-weekly or monthly or whatever your pay schedule is. In other ways, we are giving our information away willfully, or we're signing up in these social media accounts. We're being asked to identify ourselves in one way or another. And even if sometimes we try to do things anonymously, but we even check in. right? So if I'm flying to Texas, I'm going to check in that I'm at, this airport or that airport, or if I go to an exotic vacation destination, we like to show off and let everybody know. So we're checking in. So think about all of the ways that we are willfully giving our information, and that information can be used for nefarious reasons, right? Your information can be on the dark web because somebody hacked your credit card company or your bank. So, we are already exposed or have exposed ourselves in one way or another. However, with this questionnaire that the census is issuing to houses and residences across this country, the information is to be used so that we can have the right representation and services in our communities that the numbers determine that we should. And so I'm going to discuss the ways in which the census counts will impact us. But first, what is the census? The census is simply a count of the U.S. population, not U.S. citizens, not those who are nationalized to America, just the population. So if you have someone that's living with you, or you yourself are here on a visa, then you should be counted in the census. Even if you are an undocumented immigrant, you too should be counted in the census. The census counts the total population, meaning those who are living in this country. And some of those living in this country are not nationalized citizens. So they're not born citizens. So you too, or they too, should be counted. So it counts the total population in America as well as the U.S. territories, which obviously includes Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And this is something that's done every 10 years. It's mandated by the U.S. Constitution to take place every 10 years. And the first census was taken in 1790. And so the 2020 census is the 24th time that the U.S. population has been counted. So who should be numbered in the census count? So for your household, you would count those individuals who live under your roof, even if that's not their permanent residence. If you have a sister that's been crashing on your couch for 6 months, if you have a brother that's been sleeping in the basement for 7 months, if you have your grown child, your grown son or your grown daughter that's been living there, if you have a newborn, if you have an infant, that infant too should be counted. So everyone who lives within your household should be included in that count, even if they're staying with you on a temporary basis. Okay. Now, what are some questions that are on the census questionnaire? One, how many people are living in your house? Another question is the type of home, the type of residence. So is it a house? Is it an apartment? Is it a mobile home? That's necessary because that kind of information on home ownership can be an indicator of how well or how poorly the nation's economy is faring. And it also helps to determine and administer housing programs, housing planning and decision making, because this kind of information also helps with projected numbers. Another question on the census is they may ask for your phone number, or they will ask for your phone number just so that they can follow up if there's follow-up questions. The name, gender, and age of those who are in the household, as well as the ethnicity and the race of those who are living in that household. And reportedly, that information regarding race specifically is requested because the data helps the federal agencies in the government work to provide anti-discrimination provisions like the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. So we had the what and we had the who. So when does the census start? So every 10 years, and this year in March, most households, if not all, would have began receiving information, notifications that the census was coming. You might have seen commercials on television. You might have seen tables with information about census at your local municipal meetings. And in April, the paper questionnaires were mailed out to the households. And if you have not mailed your census questionnaire back, or if you didn't do it online, then in July, locally, your town would have started hiring census takers. And these are people who will go to those households that the Census Bureau has not had a reply from so that they can complete those questionnaires. And these census takers will start soon, as late July, early August, to start knocking on doors so that they can get those questionnaires completed. Now, if you feel uncomfortable answering the question of the census taker, then you can just ask for information on how you can do this online or on the telephone. You don't have to answer their questions. But if you do, and if you're comfortable doing that, that's fine, because that information is to be maintained confidentially. I'll also add that the census takers will have identification. They'll have badges that'll have their picture on it, as well as a watermark of the Census Bureau, that so that you can know that this person is authorized to proceed with this questionnaire with you. They would also have census material. Their bags and other items that they have with them will have the U.S. Census Bureau logo on them. Now, I will say this: if you have some concern that the person or people that have been coming to your house, knocking on your door or your neighbor's doors, if you have questions or suspicions that there might be something going on that is inappropriate, then you can call your regional census office and either report that person or just ask a question. If you think that the person who represented the Census Bureau might have been intrusive or had some kind of misconduct in their actions or in their engagement with you, then you can also report that. And I say it's important to report anything that you think might be suspicious or some kind of misconduct, because, we live in a society where people are trying to get information, they're trying to hack us, and because it is census time, then they may try to capitalize on this opportunity to get our information for, wicked purposes. So if you think that your neighborhood has people in it that probably don't represent the Census Bureau, let the Census Bureau know so that they can begin an investigation, because we don't want people coming into our communities getting our information, as I said, for nefarious reasons. We already have enough suspicion within the Black community towards federal agencies, social service agencies, government agencies. So if you see something that's off, then just make sure you contact your regional Census Bureau so that they can, certainly look into that. So census takers will begin coming to knock on doors, again, for anyone or any household that has not returned or completed that questionnaire from about August to October. And then in December, that count is reported to the president and to the Congress, which is something that's also mandated by law. Now, let's talk about why. Why is this census count important? Why is it important that our communities submit this information? How does it help and benefit us? Well, the first thing I'll say is that the census count and the population count that is represented in the census, it will determine the number of seats that each state has in the House of Representatives. It will also determine congressional and state legislative districts, and it will help decide how federal dollars are disseminated across the nation. And so I always try to bring things down to the local community level, because sometimes when we're talking about things statewide or nationwide, that's so broad. So, but does your community need better roads, right? Does your community need more grocery stores? Does your community need parks? What is it that your community needs? Now, if you're not counted, if you're not counting your children, if you're not counting your elderly parents, then the federal government doesn't have that information, your local congressperson doesn't have that information, your mayor doesn't have that information to inform decisions that are going to be made that will directly impact your community. And there are many federal programs that are serving residents in the population that are federally funded. And it's, block grants. Those of you who are civically engaged, you probably heard of block grants and community health services, but specifically some of the largest programs that they uses the U.S. Census data to fund programs. Some of these programs are the Medical Assistance Program, ran by Health and Human Services, the SNAP, if you may have heard of SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, that's ran by the USDA, Highway and Construction, by the Department of Transportation. Again, like I said, determining, the kind of roadway structure and maintenance your roads will get. The federal Pell Grant, which is the Education Department. I myself was a recipient of the Pell Grant, and I was very grateful to have that as financial aid when I was in college. The National Lunch Program, ran by the USDA. The Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, ran by Health and Human Services. Title I grants to local educational agencies, the Education Department, as well as special education grants to states. We also have the special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children, and that is otherwise known as WIC. Many of you are familiar with WIC, and that's the USDA Head Start. Some of our children will or have attended Head Start programs, and that's Health and Human Services. The state health, children's health insurance programs, the school breakfast programs, as well as low-income home energy assistance. And so these are some programs that all of us can benefit from, or may have benefited from, or may need in the future. And so it is important that we provide the necessary and relevant information on the questionnaire so that when it's time for us or our neighbors or our family members to access services, that these services have funding. And that is going to be determined by the population in states and in towns. Also, I'll add that business owners or prospective business owners use census data to determine the types of businesses or where businesses will be located, right? So if I wanted to open up a soul food restaurant, then I need to know if this area, town, neighborhood are people who are likely to patron my restaurant. If I want to open a fashion store, a retail store, I need to know the population. I need to know the trends to determine if this is right for me to open a business. You may be thinking about opening a business within the next 5 years, within the next 7 years, the next 2 years. And so the census data provides information, and it also helps with projected information. So like you're thinking predictive, 5 years from now, would it be good for me to begin a home development corporation, for example? What are the trends? Well, the census data, the census information can help direct, all of these decisions, restaurants, stores, factories, offices. It can also help employers when you want to, recruit employees to work for your company. Employers too track and check census data. So it's just very, very important. And, we don't want to miss out on being able to access services that our community could need because the funding isn't there, because that population hasn't been counted because the population did not complete their census questionnaire. So I encourage you to do so. Now, you may say, well, okay, how? How do I respond to the census questionnaire? As I said, in March, your household likely received a questionnaire in the mail. I got my questionnaire in the mail. And I went online to complete my questionnaire because the paper questionnaire gave my household an identification number. So instead of completing the questionnaire and dropping it in the mailbox, I just opened up my laptop. It took me about 10 minutes to answer the questions, and I was done. So you can do it by mail, submitting it, or you can do it online. You can also call a toll-free number, and that number is 1-844-330-2020. Again, that number is 1-844-330-2020 if you want to do it by phone. If you or someone else is not a native English speaker, there are numbers that you can dial for your particular language, and languages include Japanese, Cantonese, Arabic, Haitian Creole, Spanish, Cantonese. So if you or someone that you know should complete the questionnaire but is not a native English speaker, then you can go to 2020census.gov, 2020census.gov, and it'll give you a list of phone numbers that you can call for your specific language needs. If you want to complete your census online and you have not done so, you can go to 2020census.gov to complete your questionnaire. Now, let me say that the questionnaire is confidential, it's anonymous, and the numbers or the information that's provided is only being used to produce statistics. And I'll also say that it is against the law for the information, your personal information, to be published, nor can your responses be used against you by any law enforcement agency or court. So the answers are confidential. It's anonymous. It is just used for numbers. Now you may say, well, then why do they ask for my name? Why are they asking for my gender? Look, all I'm telling you is that the information is confidential. Maybe they're asking for that information so that there's not duplicates. I don't know why they're asking for names. I don't have that information, but maybe you can get that information by going to Census 2020census.gov so that you can ask those questions yourself. You know, there's frequently asked questions, and you have the toll-free numbers, and I'm sure that you can get those specific questions answered. If you just are not comfortable, you could even ask the census taker that's coming to you, because they've also had training. And if they can't answer your questions, they can provide you with a phone number or a website where you can get your questions answered. Again, 2020 census is upon us. I encourage you to engage civically by completing your census questionnaire. You might have a teenager that in 10 years is going to be 24. Right? And this 24-year-old might be considering home ownership. What options are going to be available? Some of those options are going to be determined by federal funds that are disseminated throughout our states and throughout our towns. So I encourage you, you may have an 8-year-old, right? But in 10 years, that eight-year-old will be 18, possibly thinking about college, right? So what kind of financial aid resources are going to be available? What kind of educational services are going to be available? So this is not just for us adults, for us to not want to be bothered with it, but this can impact the decisions and the resources that are allocated for our children or our grandchildren, when they're of age and interested in taking advantage of opportunities. As I said, there's WIC, and there's, needy families and housing assistance. Any of us could fall on hard times, any of our family members or our neighbors. And we want to make sure that the money is there for us to access services in the event that we might need them. Now, I looked up the percentage of responses that have been submitted by my city and other what we call urban cities. So Camden, New Jersey, there's been a 45% response rate thus far. Atlantic City, 40% response rate. Newark is 44% response rate. Trenton, 42%. Chicago, 55%. Detroit, there's been a 48% response to the census questionnaire. Baltimore is 52%. Oakland, California is 65% response rate. St. Louis is 49%. I encourage you to encourage your neighbors, your friends, your family to complete the census questionnaire. I get that we might feel uncomfortable. We're not eager to submit our information. But as I said, if you're working a job and you're completing or filing your taxes, the IRS already has our information. Our bank accounts are being hacked, and our credit card companies are being hacked for nefarious reasons. Nobody's hacking us because they want to improve our credit score, right? But here we have this opportunity to engage civically so that we can ensure that where we're living, where we are conducting our business, that our districts are served by the right representation in Congress, that our legislative districts are being formatted appropriately based on the population in these areas. But it's up to us, and it's up to us to engage and to be, responsible citizens. So I encourage you, if you have not completed your U.S. Census questionnaire, I encourage you to do so. You can go online, again, at 2020census.gov. You can call the toll-free number, or you can simply complete your questionnaire and return it in the mail. Any questions, go to that website. But when these young people are going to be coming knocking on your doors and my door, well, not my door because I already returned my questionnaire. But when they come knocking, these are young people who are taking a job and doing their best to fulfill their obligation. And so don't be harsh to them. Don't be mean to them. If you decline to engage with them, you can do it online. But be courteous. These young people are out here knocking, and it's not easy, and rejection is not easy. So be easy on the young people that are going to be knocking on your door, or even if they're not young, just be kind, be courteous. But I do encourage you to return your census questionnaire. I want to thank you for joining me in this episode of the Nurah Speaks Podcast. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nurah Speaks Podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, nurahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@nurahspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nurah Speaks Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nurah Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.